This forbidden anime begins with a girl named Ritsuki getting angry at her little brother Kyuya. She's mad at him because, as it turns out, she told her not to be home since she was planning to watch some DVDs with her friend that day. However, Kyuya, being in his rebellious stage, didn't obey her, and even brought his own friend to hang out with at home. He challenges her authority and asks why he should even bother doing as she says in the first place. The two end up insulting each other, and eventually, Ritsuki leaves, saying she's had enough of him. Exasperated, Kyuya leans back and lets out a deep sigh. His friend then tells him he should have said that he had a really cute older sister. Simultaneously, Ritsuki's friend also shows interest in her brother. She tells Ritsuki that Kyuya looks handsome and that he's probably a ladies' man. Ritsuki and Kyuya immediately question the compliments of their friends. They both then start saying everything they dislike about each other. It's clear as day that they both can't stand each other at all. Then, Ritsuki recalls that Kyuya used to be cute and obedient when he was still little. However, when he entered his rebellious phase, their relationship slowly started to turn sour. Things got worse over time, reaching a point where simply seeing each other would lead to arguments. One day, Ritsuki arrives home from school soaked because of the heavy rain. She can't help but complain about being drenched while trying to dry her clothes outside the house. When she enters the house, Ritsuki is suddenly shocked to see Kyuya so buffed after his glow-up arc. She asks what he's doing, and he says he's just trying to dry himself because he doesn't want to make a mess inside the house. Since she hasn't seen him without clothes for a long time now, Ritsuki is surprised to see how buffed Kyuya's body has become. She can't hold back and tries to get a closer look at his newfound physique. Kyuya feels creeped out that Ritsuki would suddenly inspect his physique closely. He calls her out for it, and she immediately gets flustered because she knows it's true. To avoid dealing with the issue, Ritsuki simply acts meanly toward Kyuya as always. Tired of her antics, Kyuya tells her to shut up and says he's going to take a bath. As he leaves, he accidentally bumps into Ritsuki, making her fall to the floor and injure her ankle. While she rests in her room later, Ritsuki thinks about how Kyuya used to be like a wobbly and weak bean sprout. That is why she was so surprised that he got so buffed. Above everything else, he ended up having her ideal body type before she even realized it. She feels annoyed by it and says it's just unacceptable. Outside her room, Kyuya is annoyed that Ritsuki got injured with just a little bump from him. He suddenly enters Ritsuki's room without knocking, which startles her. She yells and throws a pillow at him, saying he shouldn't just barge into her room without permission. Kyuya says he doesn't want to be there too, but he was asked to check on her. At first, Ritsuki says she's fine, and her injuries aren't really a big deal. However, she quickly changes her tone after realizing she has an opportunity to guilt-trip Kyuya. She playfully teases him that she might not be able to walk anymore because of what he did. Despite knowing she's just messing around, Kyuya is still annoyed, saying she only got injured because she was clumsy. Ritsuki doesn't pay attention to what Kyuya says and instead, asks him to give her a massage as an apology. Since he doesn't want to owe her forever, Kyuya accepts her request. While massaging Ritsuki, Kyuya suddenly wonders if she is always that soft. He recalls her having a body like a boy, and he hasn't noticed until that point that she actually has his preferred body type. As she savors her reward, Ritsuki lets out a mischievous smile because everything is going according to her plans. All she has to do now is accuse him of something, and she's confident his face will end up flush red with embarrassment. However, she gets totally caught off guard and Kyuya suddenly applies some strange hand gestures on her cake. She immediately wonders if it's an accident or if he's doing it on purpose. Ritsuki calls Kyuya out, asking if he's suddenly feeling cultural because of her. He tells her not to get the wrong idea and says she's thinking too highly of herself. Ritsuki suddenly wonders why she's getting embarrassed and believes her plans have been derailed. Little does she know that Kyuya has already contracted the Alabama 18 virus. Kyuya then flips her over and says he'll keep going with his cultural advances. Surprisingly, she doesn't object and simply says he can do whatever he wants. It was at that moment that the Alabama 18 virus started coursing through their veins. So, Kyuya goes on to get a good grasp of her twin personalities. Ritsuki knows they shouldn't go any further because they're about to cross a bridge of no return. She tries to stop him at first, but when she sees his mini gym is now wide awake, she isn't able to stop herself from playfully stomping it with her feet. Then, suddenly, the Alabama 18 virus fully takes hold of Kyuya's mind. He grapples Ritsuki and exposes her apple pie so he can closely examine it. Ritsuki tells Kyuya he can't go any further, but he just ignores her. He then goes on to inspect and fiddle with her apple pie until it starts releasing its warm sweet sticky syrup. Kyuya immediately questions what he just did. He realizes it's something that he can no longer pass off as a simple joke. Since he's already dipped his foot in the ocean, Kyuya figures he might as well just go dive in for an all-out swim instead. After that, Kyuya stops holding back and gets ready to let his mini gym destroy her apple pie. Ritsuki tries to tell him to stop, but he knows well enough that she's just pretending. He tells her to fight back sincerely if she wants him to stop. She tells him she'll let him off the hook if he backs off. However, Kyuya doesn't pay attention to her because he knows she's just lying to herself and putting up a real fight. Since he can no longer hold the overwhelming culture within him, Kyuka lets his mini gym finally savor her warm apple pie. With that, Ritsuki has already contracted the Alabama 18 virus. She immediately gets disoriented and slowly feels herself drift into the realm of cultural satisfaction as Kyuya's mini gym precisely targets the sweet spots of her warm apple pie. At that point, she could no longer stop herself from letting out some questionable, but heavenly cultural sounds. She tries to put up one final stand, but Kyuya just tells her to just let it go already and be honest with herself because they both know she doesn't want to stop the Alabama 18 from spreading. Then, Kyuya's mini gym suddenly gets fiercer in devouring her apple pie and it immediately makes Ritsuki's mind slowly melt. Eventually, Ritsuki tells Kyuya that if he continues to let his mini gym work on her apple pie, it might break apart. Of course, he doesn't listen to her again so her mind blanks out as her apple pie breaks apart and a great cultural flood of warm sweet sticky syrup bursts out of it. As she gasps for air, Ritsuki says she couldn't believe that someone like Kyuya was able to demolish her apple pie. Feeling insulted, Kyuya goes all out and lets his mini gym make a mess out of her warm apple pie again. Ritsuki is easily overwhelmed and Kyuya calls her out for making loud heavenly cultural sounds. Desperate to save face, Ritsuki says she hates him, but her face and her body's reaction say otherwise. Of course, Kyuya also picks up on it and points out she doesn't sound convincing at all. Ritsuki is aware that if things go on as it is, she'll be in trouble. She eventually admits that even if she doesn't want her apple pie to burst, she can't stop it. Of course, when the time is right, Kyuya lets his mini gym unleash all its organic yogurt which leads to Ritsuki's apple pie breaking again and releasing another great flood of warm sweet sticky syrup. As the two catch their breath after their rich cultural exchange, they suddenly hear Mommy greet Poppy who has just arrived home. Poppy asks how Ritsuki is doing since she got hurt. Mommy says it's nothing to worry about because it's only a mild sprain. Ritsuki tells Kyuya to get his mini gym away from her apple pie already and he immediately does so because he doesn't want to get in trouble too. Ritsuki sees the organic yogurt leaking from her warm apple pie and says it's awful. Kyuya says she has no right to talk like that because she was the one letting out loud cultural sounds earlier while crying. Embarrassed, Ritsuki says he's the worst. She also starts making excuses for her behavior, saying that she was just pent up because she just recently broke up with her boyfriend. She says it's the only reason why he made use of his mini gym, but Kyuya knows she's just capping. Ritsuki even goes as far as to say that she doesn't like him at all. However, while she does say that, she can't help but stare and thirst over Kyuya's amazing god bod. Sometime later, Mommy and Poppy tell Ritsuki and Kyuya that they'll be going on a cruise ship. It seems they were given some free tickets and want to take the opportunity to get a free vacation. They tell them they'll be staying for a night there, so Ritsuki and Kyuya should just make their own dinner that day. Ritsuki starts to panic inside because she realizes that she'll be alone with Kyuya that night. The two then lock eyes and immediately turn the other way in a snobbish way, as if nothing happened and they're still mortal enemies.
Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel.